Welcome to the Daily Technology Pulse podcast by Daily Computers, your expert technology partners for public and private sector organizations throughout Maryland and Virginia. This episode is brought to you by HP. HP's artificial intelligence is leading the way for change and innovation for the future of organizations all around the world. And now your host, Rick from Daily.
Joining us today on the Technology Pulse podcast, we have Jerome Gabryszewski. He is the AI and Data Science Business Development Manager for North America for HP. Jerome, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Rick. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Yep, and we're thrilled to have you. And today is going to be one heck of a topic that we're going to talk about. And I know in just talking with customers and prospects of Daily over the years, this is something that garners a lot of attention, where we're going to be talking about AI, particularly when it comes to, our SLED market, our state and local government and education, both K-12 and higher ed. But Jerome, before we jump into that topic, let's have you introduce yourself. Tell us about your role at HP, how long you've been there, and, just give us some background.
Sure, absolutely. So I've been with HP since I graduated college in 2016, so about 8 years or so. I studied both economics and finance in college, and then kind of fell into some sales roles in HP, kind of as a happy accident due to some family stuff. And then I've kind of made my way up the chain at HP over the years, multiple different sales roles, and now kind of more into a sort of a subject matter expert in business development role for kind of our higher end solutions in regards to data science and AI, and kind of got there just by, doing a lot of really high end work with some SLED customers. Actually, I actually come from the SLED world myself. And so really having to get technical with, a few of, my local universities and stuff here in Nashville really kind of propelled me to just get really interested and, really excited about, this new world of AI and compute that we have, coming down the pipeline for us.
And I have to say, depending on who you're talking to, people are either very excited or very nervous about AI. And it's not just limited to SLED. I think it's everywhere, because you've heard all of the misconception. It's going to take away jobs. It's going to replace humans. It eventually is going to rise up like, the Terminator movies and take us all out. And I think the one thing we want to do throughout this program is make sure that we're clearing up plenty of those misconceptions, because I think people just give AI a bad rap because we have that science fiction mindset, right?
And I think some of that's somewhat fair. However, I think like one of the misconceptions that people have is that like the AI is kind of this new phenomenon. And what I'll say about that is, I think the consumptive part of it is somewhat of a new phenomenon. So like your and I's ability to kind of interface and interact with it, with the chat GPTs and the DALYs and the mid journeys and all this cool, large language models and image creations. But the reality of the matter is, AI has been around since like the 1950s. So, we've kind of had a slow journey to where we are today. And it's just something that is, I believe, a little bit lost on people. We kind of went to the world of early on. We used to use data like from the past to try to do, some sort of predictions. Then we got into the world of machine learning, where we could, with very, very structured and very defined data, be able to make, even better future predictions, things like forecasting. And then we got into deep learning, which is kind of what really accelerated our ability to do what we're doing with AI today, which is getting computers and data sets to be understood in an unstructured manner. And then now we're in this world of where we can use those structured and unstructured data sets to make new things, right, with Gen AI. But I think the one thing as well is people being nervous about it is rightly so. But I think one thing we have to remember is AI is here really to enhance productivity and augment the human, right? Like there's still always going to be an interface between human beings and the technology. And so with AI, it's really about how we use it.
Right. And I have to say now, that stat that you gave before, it's been around since the 1950s. That shocks me, because I would have thought maybe the inkling of the beginning was in the 80s or the 90s, because you don't really think of computers being around in the 1950s, right? But they were there.
They
It
were.
just nobody had them outside of huge organizations and government entities, right?
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about, right, like, an Alan Turing and his Enigma machine, right, in World War II, using it to decode, encrypted language from the Germans, that's really kind of the beginning and early development of what we know as artificial intelligence today.
And just like you said, there's always going to be a human component, right? Because I mean, as much as we like to, again, it's fantasizing, and whether you're fantasizing in a good way or fantasizing in a bad way that it's going to happen, thinking that computers are just going to start thinking for themselves, it's really not anything close to that.
Correct. Yeah. And I mean, if you look at everything we have today, right, everything is prompted essentially by a human being. Like, all the creativity that comes from AI comes from the creativity of what's in your brain and your fingertips.
And there are a lot of people. You'd mentioned the Chat GPT, and I know a lot of people, particularly in the communications world, who utilize Chat GPT for everything from, I've got to come up with some ideas for a marketing plan, or a social media strategy, or I want to write some social media posts, and my creativity is just out the door today. To I know people that have used it to help produce the outline for research papers and everything kind of in between. But it's not like you could just say to ChatGPT, write me a research paper, and not give it any parameters and not give it any thought. And then it's just going to spit something out that's going to be absolutely perfect. That's just not the way AI works.
Correct. Yeah. And not today. Maybe, in the future, we can have something where it gets a little bit more advanced than that. And I know, right, especially with ChatGPT and those folks at OpenAI, they're making some insane advancements, right? Like, they have recently, speaking of Alan Turing, they beat the Turing test, right? They've already been able to trick a human being into being able to think it's a human. And so we're kind of in this weird place where we're not quite at the place where people are scared, like they're currently scared of. We're not at that arena where, AI is just fully taken over and making holistic decisions, but like, when prompted correctly, can do some really incredible things.
Yeah, and there's always going to be that limitation on it. Now, I have to think that one of the limitations, particularly when it comes to utilizing AI in the computing world, is the hardware, right? You have to have some really specific hardware in order to be able to power these machines with enough juice. I'll just use my non-technical term, enough
Sure.
juice to really make the AI not just function, but function well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think we're kind of in that new world of compute where, everyone's going to, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on what side of the fence you're on, you're going to need more compute to do all of this stuff, because not only are you going to kind of utilize AI within different applications like a Copilot or a ChatGPT or something like that, but you're going to start to see, a multitude of different software start to integrate artificial intelligence applications. Think about places like, an Autodesk or, Rivet and some of these other technologies, SolidWorks, right? These media and design technologies, GitHub has a code Copilot to help, data scientists and developers build out really complex code and make sure that it's correct and finding errors and stuff before things get deployed. And so all of that comes with a requirement to have a little bit more compute power. And I think one of the misconceptions of, how people think about AI and AI development and Gen AI and machine learning and all of these, data science applications is everyone thinks that you need to have some crazy server configuration or some, really intense cloud compute setup. And the reality is that, with certain edge compute solutions, right, I think, HPZ workstations, but, insert your vendor of choice. Like, there's a lot that you can do in the world of edge computing with even just some high-end desktops. And where that really benefits folks is, especially people that are new to the AI journey, they're not sure, how to integrate it into their environment and make it valuable or productive, in their workspace. Having a local edge resource where you're in a really fixed cost model allows your, data science and ops teams to go in there and try new things and really be creative. And when I speak to customers out in the field and, go and have all these meetings and do all of these trade shows, what I come to find is there's a really, really sweet spot of like, hey, HP can take you really, really far in the journey. We're not saying give up your cloud GPU or not. We're not saying give up, whatever cloud infrastructure you have or whatever private cloud server, HPE GreenLake, for example, you've got. keep that, right? But let's use it more efficient and let's try to do what we can to optimize cost as you start to develop these things.
Right. You bring up a really good point because there are a lot of organizations, they're not even scratching the surface as far as how they could incorporate AI and how they could utilize AI to make things, just like you said, more efficient, more effective. I mean, that's really what the end goal for a lot of AI is efficiency and effectiveness. So they're not really sure what they need to have as far as hardware goes. So, if somebody were, say looking to get some new devices, and again, we would always love to say that we would point them directly to HP, but regardless of the manufacturer, what is it that somebody's looking for in a device that is really going to help them make the most out of the AI technology that's available today for development and consumption?
Sure. Yeah. So kind of the way that I look at it is I kind of try to separate users a little bit into two buckets if I can. So the first kind of side of the coin is, really kind of deciding what you're going to be doing with the AI. And I think that's a really, really key thing. Our chief data officer always says, put the use case before the tools. So figure out what it is that you want to do before you figure out what tools you need to do it. But if you're just going to be doing, general consumption of AI, right? Like you're going to be just doing queries within, Chat GPT, for example, or you're going to be just, using Microsoft Copilot to say, hey, help me develop this PowerPoint or help me do these things. You're probably going to be good. One of the newer, laptop or desktop solutions that have, some NPUs in there, right? What a neural processing unit allows you to do is accelerate some of these large language models and query response times and things like that. Really, really nice to have. But the one thing that needs to be remembered with those is, to not get too technical here, that is a shared resource on any given system that you put it in, right? So we call it a system on a chip. So that is going to share space, right, with your CPU. It's going to share RAM against your CPU. And so those neural processing units are very, very good for kind of the entry level of consumption of AI, right? But then if you go to the other bucket, you're going to be looking at people that are going to be, generating and deploying AI. And maybe they're doing RAG model, maybe they're building their own LLM, maybe they're fine tuning a different data set or doing something like that. And those types of use cases, you really, really need to have some sort of GPU, because the parallel processing capability of a GPU is so much stronger than anything that you have in the CPU and NPU space. And again, NPU is great to have. Really, really nice new feature that they're putting in laptops. And I think it's a really cool thing because it's been a while, right, since we've been introduced to a new component in the compute space. But just be careful in how you measure some of these things, right? So everyone measures NPUs in TOPS, which is trillions of operations per second. And, that's kind of just the response time of how you query some of these models today.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to also understand that with GPUs and NPUs, that TOPS measurement is not really created equal. And so as far as, kind of recommending devices, you got to kind of try to split it into, what AI use case do you have? And then if you're on the develop and deploy side, it requires a little bit more of a detailed conversation around, hey, what is it that you're doing? What tools are you planning to use? Because then you can really kind of tailor a pretty custom kind of, GPU, CPU configuration for those users.
And for those unfamiliar, can you let us know exactly what a GPU is?
Yeah. So it's a, graphics processing unit, right? And so we used to think of that in the past as people that were, doing, media, video game design, people that were playing video games, those sorts of things. But GPUs today are able to process data in a way that CPUs are not. So if you look at, a GPU outside of the media and entertainment or engineering space, you got GPUs that are extremely powerful in the world of data science, because how CPUs process information is very linear. So they take the first thing, the second thing, the third thing, and they have to do it in that order. Whereas a GPU can parallel process over the entirety of the VRAM that's available. So it allows it to process steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 at the same time, for example. So when you're training these AI models that have millions and billions of parameters, it really benefits you to have the ability to kind of parallelize that across a spectrum versus doing it in a linear fashion.
Wow. No, and that's really good to know. And that is the thing. I never even began to think that a graphics processing unit would be something that would be beneficial to AI, but you really made that understandable, especially to me. So now I know pretty much anybody can understand it.
Yeah.
Uh, but no, that's great. Now, you mentioned before about look at the use case before you take a look at, again, the system that you're looking at. What are some of the more common use cases you're seeing for AI within the SLED market?
So I see a lot in the research and development space, especially in higher education. So, one of my customers when I was, a field salesperson was Vanderbilt, and they're doing a lot with, AI in the microscopy space. So think about microbiology, studies of the human brain, things of that nature, cataloging images, doing stuff like that. They have a project over there right now where they're using artificial intelligence to act as a real-time optometrist almost for some of their higher-end microscopes. So one of the issues that they have is, they've got a theoretical resolution, but as you go to like scan something in real life, you can never actually get to that theoretical maximum. And there's a lot of math involved, as it turns out, into trying to get your actual as close to that theoretical as possible. And so, utilization of an AI thing in that regard really saves that researcher a lot of time and a lot of, math exercise, and they can actually focus on whatever it is that is the project or task at hand. In the K-12 space, I know that there's a lot of, kind of back and forth between like, I actually was talking to one of my colleagues the other day, and, they had the teacher using AI to help develop lesson plans, but would not allow the students to utilize AI to help, do some of their schoolwork. And so you've got this sort of really interesting dynamic, if you will, in the K-12 space. But kind of use cases there, you see people plagiarizing homework, using AI to help teach kids. Some of the things that are going to be kind of coming down the pipe is like you're going to have to start learning how to like use these models, integrate these models, use these models to kind of build data sets and do predictive analytics and some of those things. And so as kids are kind of going through the STEM part of their education, I think the utilization of AI in a safe way is going to be beneficial to kids and kind of helping them get ready for, the future of technology and sort of jobs of the future, if you will. I would say too, as like a word of advice to like anyone that's trying to like kind of look to play and deploy and, maybe use some of this stuff is HP. When the world of AI kind of blew up, we didn't want all of our employees just openly using that on, work devices or inside of our HP network. Cause, it's terrifying. You might like leak your data and, lose IP or lose money or lose something, really valuable to your organization. And so what our chief data officer went ahead and did for us, because he knew he wasn't going to be able to stop it, was he opened 4 different sort of sandboxes where you could kind of log in outside of HP's network and start to play with some of these AI tools. And if you had an idea, you could maybe go try to develop it there. And as long as you had your email and you knew who your manager was, you could get access to some of this stuff. And it allowed people sort of a safe place to go and play. Right. And so I would recommend sort of a similar way for not only K-12, but also higher education, right? If you're worried, but also curious, maybe try to figure out a way to allow people to toy around with it without putting your broader organization at risk. And there's a multitude of different ways that you can go about doing that.
Yeah. And there are a lot of people that don't realize that. They don't realize that with a widely available tool like ChatGPT, you are putting information out there and it's being stored, because the main goal of ChatGPT is to learn and get better. And so it's taking this information and it's storing that information. And I've heard of the horror stories. You had mentioned about losing IP, where you had somebody within an organization. There was one just a couple of months ago. It was a think tank. Somebody was putting together a proposal and they put all of the information about their product or service into ChatGPT and said, write me a business use case for this. Mm-hmm. And all of that information ended up getting stored in there. And the CEO of the company ended up just performing a Google search to try to see if any information about it had leaked out, and brought up his entire, their entire system data, and was livid. So these are the things where, you don't realize that information is out there. But then also talking about, you're talking about education, and I certainly can understand as a former educator myself, I don't want somebody utilizing ChatGPT to do their homework for them. I don't want them to use it to write a research paper. But I like the idea and I like the concept of having it as that backup, because the teacher can't always be there. The educator can't always be there. They're not on call 24/7. And so, I have a son who's in high school right now. And I've told him, I said, you will never use ChatGPT to do an assignment for you. But if you are, say, putting together, you're writing something, you're writing a paper, or you're writing a couple of paragraphs, and you want to make sure that what you're saying is factual, you want to make sure that what you're saying is correct, you want to make sure that you're saying it in the proper way, I have no problem with him taking something that he wrote and putting it into, either the Chat GPT or the Google AI or whatever else there it might be, where, he could then put that in there and have it provide any feedback or provide any recommendations, because I think that could be really useful.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. And I think there's even beyond that, there's even more applications to it, right? Around people that are in marketing classes, right? Like using some of that stuff to be as creative as they want in their brain, but maybe they're not as good with their hands, right? So like using some of these things to do image creation, to help with, videos, animation, game design, some of these things that, kids are getting into. There's a lot of really cool and unique things that they can do. And I do find that to still be, an educational type of path and activity. But I think that you need to create sort of, not to keep using the repetitive word sandbox, but you need to create a little bubble in which that they're able to utilize this technology and play with it, but they still also go through the traditional schooling and understand basic literacies and concepts. Like you can't just totally utilize artificial intelligence to substitute real and valuable education. Kind of back to my point earlier, like use it to augment a human and use it to be more productive, use it as a learning tool, but don't use it as a crutch. And I
Correct.
think that's where you sort of run into some trouble, right, within the K-12, because that's a tough. It's easier said than done, certainly, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I like the idea of having a closed environment that people could utilize, because the one thing organizations will need to realize is if you have that closed environment and you're providing this type of support, you can also monitor it. You could see what people are putting into it. My worry about having the AI solution write the paper for a student, if they're utilizing a closed AI system, like you said, a sandbox, the teachers and the administration are going to be able to see that. They're able to see what users are using it for. And, it's the same as the old days back when I was teaching English composition at the college level. We used to have the service called Turnitin. And what it was a huge database of academic papers. And you could take any research paper that somebody had produced, you can run it through the Turnitin system, and it would tell you if anything was plagiarized, whether it's plagiarized from a public source or plagiarized from another paper. And it really was a very useful tool. And again, to me, that's almost like what this closed environment would be able to provide. You would still have that same oversight where you could see if somebody's using it for means, or for something that they shouldn't be using it for. And that would really give them, I think it would give them more peace of mind to incorporate AI more into the classroom environment, into the learning environment, into the work environment, because they wouldn't have to worry so much that somebody's utilizing it incorrectly, somebody's putting information out there that they shouldn't, or somebody is, again, trying to use it to, do the work for them so that they're not actually learning.
Correct. Yeah, I think that's spot on.
And now I have to think, so you mentioned about HP kind of taking the forefront and putting together that sandbox so that you could incorporate that. How else has HP been really developing new solutions to help us go further in this new compute world that we have because AI is here?
Sure. So I think, one of the first things that comes to my mind is a proactive analytics program that we've had actually for a number of years now. But we've been doing basically machine and deep learning on our own devices for a number of years to start to do predictive failure analysis and also start to do sort of predictive analysis around, what is a user going to need in their device and, maybe their next refresh, right? Like, a lot of, IT people have trouble kind of right size fitting their organization without, having a multitude of different standards. I used to run into that a lot in the SLED space where you had a lot of different users, you had a lot of different personas, but the IT team were like, hey, we want to have like 3 or 4 standards. We don't want to manage a giant level of images. And so with proactive analytics, we can kind of give you a lot of feedback around your users' information. How are they using their CPUs? How are they using their GPUs? How much RAM are they utilizing at any given time in their workflow? And really give, data-driven feedback to organizations around what sort of things that they should be putting in their devices and really kind of, cost optimizing their technology spend. And then the predictive failure side of that, right? Like we can, with a pretty high degree of accuracy today, predict when your hard drive is going to fail or when your RAM is going to, be corrupted. And it allows your IT organizations to really be proactive in the replacement or, repair of those pieces of equipment and really kind of keep, your productivity time up, downtime to a minimum. And so that's kind of one of the main ways that we kind of take some of these AI and machine learning practices and, use it to provide value to our customers. Another way that we're kind of using AI that I actually learned from our chief data officer the other day is they started to build a predictive large language model internally around HP's performance in the marketplace and Wall Street sentiment, right? So they have an AI model today that, based on the results of any of our quarterly performance, will give us a pretty accurate idea of how Wall Street is going to respond to said performance, what questions they may come and ask us. And there's still some training to be done on this, but we're starting to do some prediction around, how all of this stuff in this training model will affect like our stock price, right? In any given quarter. They, based on our performance last quarter, they predicted that we would, have a little bit of a downtick, but we ended up having a little bit of an increase, which we're very happy for, obviously. But that kind of goes to shows us that we have obviously some more work to be done here, and we've got to do some additional, training and fine tuning in the model that we're using to create value there. And then, sort of in my organization, in the advanced compute solutions world, we're starting to develop, AI solutions and software to allow data scientists, developers to better collaborate and aggregate their data and really kind of create a single pane of glass where they can get all of their information, get all of their data, build a model, deploy a model, and work together as a team. And that's sort of a unique, offering that not too many people do in the marketplace today. And then we're also in the process of developing what we're calling Z by HP Boost. And so what that's going to allow you to do is take advantage of idle GPUs you might have in your environment, right? So if you have, a multitude of workstations, right, but you're, at home today and you're not at your office and you're using some small laptop, no GPU, but you got to get, some fine tuning done, we're going to allow you to kind of just remotely log into a GPU, send your job there, get the data spat back to you and, really increase your productivity without you having to be tethered to, a high-end desktop workstation or some sort of, server solution. So really starting to kind of take the benefits of edge compute and that early AI development and allowing you to collaborate easier and, do some GPU sharing, which is some really exciting stuff.
No, that sounds absolutely phenomenal. And it doesn't surprise me that HP is really leading this charge in how, again, we talked about AI. It's about making things more efficient and more effective. And, you're giving us example after example of how HP really is focusing on that mission and helping users to become more efficient and more effective. And to me, that really shows a forward-thinking company, and we're certainly proud to be an HP partner. Now, will some of this be on display at the DALY Technology Showcase? I know a lot of people are going to be wondering about that.
Yeah. So I'm planning to be there. I do believe I have a speaking session at both of the stops. I believe in Annapolis and Richmond. So yeah, we'll have a booth. We'll have some of our higher end workstation solutions. I plan to bring a couple of demos. I want to show off that like you can do a lot of stuff with your little local computer. And so I think I'll have maybe an Llama model, right? And show that like, hey, you can actually have a large language model locally on your device without any internet connection and query away and have the freedom and safety to do whatever it is that you want without having the fear of your data being released outbound into some cloud or some, open source software. And then, yeah, maybe we'll have some demos of AI Studio and HP Boost as well. Yeah.
No, that'll be fantastic. And we certainly are really looking forward to your sessions at each of the showcase events. And to those listening, if you're not registered for the showcase, this is a perfect example of why you should register, because you're not really going to see this anywhere else. This is not something you could walk into Best Buy and have them demonstrate.
That's right.
You really need someone who knows what they're talking about, and that's why we're talking to Jerome, because he certainly does.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I appreciate it, and I'm really looking forward to the showcase.
Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to it as well. So, Jerome, let me ask this as we're coming up on time. Do you have any final thoughts when we're looking at AI for SLED?
Final thought is, I know that it's a controversial, right, topic to say the least, but as an organization, spend some time, right, with your stakeholders and figure out what you think you want to do with AI and how you think it can benefit your organization, and then start to play around with those ideas, right? And one of the things to always remember is you're going to have a ton of really good ideas. You're going to have a lot of really cool, maybe use cases, for some sort of AI project, and a lot of them aren't going to pan out. HP, I think we had, when we opened those 4 sandboxes, we had 1,350 unique different ideas and proposals around different AI solutions and applications. Of those 1,350, we took 150 to production, and any current active AI solution production, any sort of tools we plan on making, any sort of internal sort of, AI large language models, anything that we think we can benefit, we're looking at maybe 10 that actually make it into a production level model. And then of those 10, you're looking at maybe 1 or 2 that actually become a finished product. And so everybody's in a stage right now of immense trial and error. And so don't be afraid to get out there and give it a try, but do it in a way that's going to be safe, and make sure you have stakeholder governance in the process.
Definitely. And obviously, if you can't make it out to the technology showcase and you want to learn more about what HP can do for your organization, all you need to do is reach out to DALY. Your DALY representative will help you with that. And again, because we have such great partners like HP, and we have such great resources at our partners like you, Jerome, we are always able to help talk our customers through anything that they might want to do, because like you said, it ends up being a lot of trial and error, but you really do need someone who can help guide you through that process. And we're always happy to be there for that.
That's absolutely correct.
Jerome, thanks so much for joining us on the Technology Pulse. I said, we really look forward to seeing you in person at the showcase, and I look forward to having you back on the show in the coming year, just to see what we can do as far as what advancements we've made.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rick, for having me. It's been an honor, and really looking forward to meeting you at the showcase, and I'm sure I'll be back.
And that wraps up another insightful episode of the Daily Technology Pulse podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Before we sign off, we want to take a moment to remind you of some important legal considerations. The views and opinions expressed by guests on the Daily Technology Pulse podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Daily Computers or its partners. The content provided in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of Daily Computers Inc. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please feel free to reach out to us. You can find us at www.daly.com. The Daily Technology Pulse podcast will be back with more exciting discussions on the latest in technology. Until next time, stay curious and stay connected.